I'm Hope Bristol. I'm Florida's chairperson for a Dependency Court Improvement Panel. We've got with us Magistrate Strawbridge, who will wave, who's doing this with me. I also wanted to really thank Aska for helping us put this together, and Carrie and Lee and Maggie, I think, are on this call. But the biggest thanks for my IT guru, Orlando, because I feel like I'm yammering on when I talk about technology because I am so bad at it, that Orlando really has made it very easy for us here in Broward. We thought that this would be a really great idea to do for folks who may be struggling a little bit with Zoom and understanding how it works and what you can do and what you may not be able to do or might need a little more work at. For someone like me, when we first started doing this, technology, like I said, it's sort of like stranger danger for me. I kind of shied away from it, but it is unbelievable the amount of work that I've been able, and our dependency division has been able to really accomplish and get done, and continue to help our families through this Zoom platform. Our families have really, we're seeing actually more involvement from parents. They don't have those transportation issues to get to the courthouse, so they've been logging on either by calling or by Zooming in and appearing at their hearings. So we've been able to get everything done from shelter hearings to pretrials to judicial reviews, perm reviews, status hearings, motion hearings. We've done adoptions. And I think a handful of judges here are going to start trying to do some trials. We've had a mock trial actually in the 17th, so we can figure out the process of getting evidence in, and I think Orlando might talk about that for a little bit. But I found it to be surprisingly easy for somebody who doesn't have a lot of IT knowledge, and I'm just thrilled that we have this platform and we're able to hopefully help you guys with any issues or concerns. We did get a number of questions submitted to us, so I'm going to ask Magistrate Strawbridge to speak for a moment and then turn it over to Orlando, and we can go through the questions that have been asked so far. And if anybody has any questions based on anything we've said, I think it's probably easiest if you want to email Orlando or Carrie, because there's so many of us that I don't want everybody to talk over themselves. Or if you want to raise your hand and ask a question, Orlando may be able to recognize you for you to ask a question.
Yeah, raising your hand would work. Also, the chat message is available, so that where we can organize some of the things as well. We are going to go through the questions from before, and then if anything's missing, we'll go through the chat and anything with raising hands and things like that. Okay.
Magistrate Strawbridge, you have anything you want to add?
I just want to say that I'm happy to be a part of this. We started on the 16th of March, and before that we'd been trying to use Zoom to get therapists to appear in our judicial review ECC hearings. So we had practiced a little bit in a tiny group and had thought it worked well. So it's been good to expand that under the stay home order. It was not expected, but the agency has really stepped up, and we've really sometimes had fun learning new things about Zoom. And I just want to encourage everyone to not be afraid of it and to ask questions. There are no dumb questions at all related to this. It's a new wide world for everyone, and happy to throw out some tips and ideas.
Thank you. Orlando, do you want to run down the questions, and we'll see if anybody has any follow-ups that they may want to ask or put in the chat room. If y'all don't know where your chat is, if you sort of hover your cursor on your page at the bottom, you'll see a list of applications, and chat is one of them. You can click on there and add in a question. Is that correct, Orlando?
That's correct. Very good. You're hired. All right. I'm going to ask everybody to go off video because since we're recording, I'm on a state network for this, so it's going to be active to whoever's on video. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I created a little PowerPoint with some of the questions that were asked. I'm going to try and go as quickly as possible through these so we can have any questions that are live also. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Now, judge and magistrate, if there's anything you guys want to add to the question or the answer, I know you sent me as well. Jump right on in as I go through this. Okay.
Thank you.
You can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so first things first, technical requirements for a judge or for anyone conducting a Zoom. Minimum memory requirements would be 4 gigs of memory. Webcam on board or USB, that just means if the webcam is built into the computer. If they want to have more privacy, right now I'm in my house and I have a couple people in the house also working as well. So what I like doing is running it with headphones that have a microphone built into them. That way I'm not like on speakerphone in the office. So especially depending on what type of hearing you're holding, headphones are probably the best to do. Next up, broadband. Minimum 1 megabit per second. That's usually the standard for most. If you're going to be doing bigger groups like this one, you're going to want the max that Xfinity has available. So 1 megabit is definitely enough for groups of 10 or 20. Anything larger, you're really going to want more. It's just because it takes up a lot of bandwidth. Smartphone, tablet. We have a lot of judges that want to use double screens. They may not have a second screen, or it's still being shipped from Amazon. So what I've been advising the judges to do is maybe running their Zoom from their iPad, so they have their iPad next to them, their laptop. They have Surface Pros at the courthouse. So their Surface Pro runs their docket, their tablet, or their iPad runs their meeting on Zoom, and they can run that from there. So that can be an Apple or Android. The app is available on the stores. And then again, Wi-Fi on the broadband or 4G minimum. Again, the 4G minimum would hit your data plan. So just be aware of that if you're out and about, which we should be staying at home. All right. So next thing here is Zoom setup at the 17th. So this is how we have all of our judges set up and GMs. Each judge has an individual Zoom account. We have, and I'll show you a quick demo of what we do with the meetings. So I have set up a recurring meeting for each judge, which we call the virtual courtroom. If the court type requires recording, I have it set to auto record. And then for first appearance court, which we're also using Zoom as well, we're pushing it through to YouTube on live stream in every session. So that's also an availability for Zoom as well, if you have a YouTube account. We're also going to probably start doing this in the public courtrooms. We've been testing it first with the first appearance. So that's coming soon for any media or public that want to view proceedings without having to go through the Zoom meeting link. Okay. A couple things, privacy concerns. In the privacy concerns, this is the biggest issue. The first couple of weeks that we were going with Zoom or trying to go with Zoom, we got a lot of emails from judges requesting, you know, why are we using Zoom? It's the privacy concerns. My kids are on Zoom, and I've heard of classes getting Zoom bombs and stuff like that. So here are some of the concerns and some of how we've been able to prevent this. So the first things first, we're not using the personal ID. The personal ID can be a little risky, although some can use it as long as they make sure waiting room is enabled and they're actively, you know, disabling the share screen and stuff like that. Within our recurring meeting that I set up, I went ahead and by default disabled screen sharing for non-hosts. I disabled anybody to join the meeting before the host. So if the judge is holding a court hearing, no one can join the actual hearing before the judge gets there. They'll be waiting behind the scenes, waiting for the judge to let them in. The other part that we have, it's a huge part of what we're doing, is enabling the waiting room. That allows you to have privacy before, during, and after the hearing. So everybody that's waiting, just like in this meeting, is in a waiting room. And they're waiting for the host or the co-host to let you into the meeting. During the hearing, you can actually send people back to the waiting room. For instance, if you have witnesses or expert witnesses that need to give testimony, once you identify who they are, you can send them back out to the virtual lobby or the waiting room, and they can wait there until their testimony is needed. Then you bring them back in one by one, send them back after they're done. It's a really good way to do that. It's also a way, and I'll talk about this later, on how to have sidebar. You can send the whole court out and just keep the attorneys present for sidebar. There's other ways we're going to do that. I'll show you that in some of the questions later on. I also disabled participant recording, and upon entry, everybody's set to mute all, but also the host is able to mute all and stop all video from starting by clicking mute all. That's a really good way for a judge to manage their Zoom meeting and really take control over what's going on in that Zoom meeting. Okay, there was initially a Facebook issue that there was an alleged, they were able to eavesdrop on Zoom user personal data, not the actual meetings, but the actual personal data. That's been since removed from the Zoom platform. It was actually only affecting people logging into Zoom from their smartphones because of the Facebook app and things like that on their phones. That's been removed from the Zoom about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago. Okay, the waiting room. So some of you were in a waiting room for a couple of seconds, maybe a couple minutes. On our court Zoom waiting room, we have it customized. So this says, please wait while the meeting host lets you in soon. We have our seal, and then we have whatever judge's meeting room name is. Mine says Orlando Zoom on my side. It also has messages, and you can customize these for your circuit, it's actually circuit wide. So you would need to decide between the chief judge and administrators what you want to put in here. So please be aware the judge may still be in finishing a previous hearing. And then we have these 6 etiquette lines. Mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Speak directly in the microphone. Each person may want to identify themselves each time they speak for purposes of the record. Speak one person at a time. Check your lighting and be mindful of what is in your background. Those are really good 6 pointers. We only really have 400 characters we can put on this area, so it's very limited. So that's pretty much what we decided to put in our background. Backgrounds, let me back up one. All right, so if you want to use a background for your, I think that's the wrong topic on top, but that's okay. If you want to use a background for your presence when you're on Zoom, you can go ahead and do that once you're logged in if your court has it enabled. And then you can pick from several different backgrounds. These are the 3 the court at the 17th are using. We took a picture of one of our courtrooms and put that in the background. A lot of staff are using this. And then the judges are using the seal with the flags, or the two seals in the background with the plain wall background. This is pretty much what it looks like in a courtroom background. And this is one that Magistrate Strawbridge sent me as well. I think this is the one she's using right now, is this green one, which is good. It's nice and plain. I've seen a couple of people with black backgrounds, white backgrounds, gray backgrounds. I like the seal touch to it. And then I think her IT department also did this courtroom look, which is, I like this picture, it's really high def. Definitely, if you're gonna do this, you wanna pick a picture that's high definition, so that it's not, grainy or anything like that. Okay. So actually, before I go on to the questions, I wanna go to the Zoom area and really show you really quick how to set up a meeting. So when you log into your meetings, when you log into your Zoom, you go to your profile. A lot of judges on my side really want to be able to have, when they're muted and their video is off, have their court profile picture on this side. The place you do that is right here, profile change, and you change the picture right here. And just make sure also it's a high resolution picture. Okay. Then if you want to set up your meeting, you go to meetings, schedule a new meeting. And this is where I set everybody up. So I go ahead and let's just say Judge Orlando. We have a Judge Orlando at our courthouse. Docket. And like I said before, it's our virtual courtroom. When an attorney or any party goes through our directory, and I'll show you that in a second, they can go and see one link for the judge, and it's exactly the same link every time. That way we don't have to worry about constantly sending out different IDs. Is this the right ID? Oh, this attorney went to the wrong Zoom ID. So I picked today's date. I started office hours, so I go 8:30 a.m. I go 8 hours. I make sure it's Eastern time, because we're not in the Pacific. And then I make it a recurring meeting. I make it weekly, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then right here, you can put it to the end of the year. I've been setting it to the end of the year for everybody. And then I don't have a password or a registration required. In our circuit, we really don't need it. The waiting room is sufficient. Enable join before host. Some judges are letting people in before if they want to talk to each other before the judge appears. I'm leaving that on them if they want to do that. Judges are able to update and modify their settings as they want. The one thing we are making sure we take care of is that we're muting everybody upon entry and enabling that waiting room. Now, recording the meeting automatically, we have some divisions that we set automatically. If anybody wants to run a recording, they can run a recording whenever they want to start. Then I hit save. I'm gonna save this one and show you guys. So a couple of questions ahead. How do I invite people? What can I use to invite? So right here, when you create your meeting, there's a copy the invitation link, and you can access this copy the invitation link anytime you want. And when you copy this meeting invitation, it copies all this text. And this gives the link, the meeting ID, and then the phone numbers available for these dial-ins. So if somebody's not available on a computer or smartphone, they can dial in and dial in this meeting ID when they get prompted, and they can join the meeting as well. So this is the message you can send out to the parties, and they will receive that Zoom link right there to log into your meeting anytime. And as I said, it's forever, so it's set up to the end of the year, so they can use that meeting. So when a judge goes to start their meeting, I've set up a bookmark on their Chrome bar, and it's called My Meetings. When they log in here, they see their meetings coming up. I have my regular meeting, and then I have the judge docket one. So I would go to today, judge docket, and then hit start. So at 8:30, I can just start my meeting, and I start my motion docket or whatever docket I'm starting. If I want to stop the meeting and come back later, because maybe my next docket's not till 10:30, I can stop, come back to this website, and start right up again. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the questions here. Which hearings, if any, shouldn't be conducted via Zoom? Technically speaking, my opinion, everything can run through Zoom. We've been doing that at the court. The jury trials are the one thing that everybody's wondering, is that possible? We ran a mock trial last week early, and it went really well. We had 2 recordings of it. We're waiting for the chief judge to give it its blessing and we're going to publish it on YouTube and send it out. But it really went well. We had a couple of judges as our jurors. Staff attorneys were our plaintiff and defendant parties, attorneys, and expert witnesses. A couple of us were, court reporters, bailiffs, technical support. So it really went well. I'm really excited to show that once we're ready to share it. I know Judge Bristol had said, so there have been some concerns when conducting trials on Zoom with regards to the ability for the attorneys to confer with their client. It's an ongoing issue that we are collecting information on. A couple things, and there's another question about this as well later.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that.
Sure.
Had been some concerns with adjudicatory trials and TPR trials that counsels for the parents are bringing up, and this is something that we're going to be addressing on that statewide task force to determine how we're going to be reopening the courts. But there are concerns that parents' attorneys are bringing up that they're not able to effectively speak with their clients if they're appearing in two different locations. And while we do have the breakout rooms that we can send attorneys and parents or their clients into the breakout rooms for them to speak without anyone else hearing, sometimes the parents want to write notes to their attorneys or whisper something to their attorneys during somebody's examination on the witness stand, and they're worried about the ability to be able to do that effectively. It would be an awful and horrible thing for a TPR that's granted after objections for it to go forward to be reversed on issues about ineffective assistance of counsel and have permanency placed out further for kids because we didn't do everything that we could do possible to make sure that attorneys can effectively represent their clients. So I'm collecting data on that from around the state to see how people are handling it. And we can put that in a document and have Oscar send it out with examples that everybody's doing. I just want everybody to really be mindful of that. If a parent does want to proceed and they're really pushing their attorneys to do so, just do an effective colloquy on them so that they fully understand what the pitfalls may be.
Okay, great. Next question here. What happens if a party or attorney lacks the technology to appear at a Zoom hearing? So all Zoom meetings can be attended via smartphone. I don't know the statistics right now on how many people that have cell phones or smartphones, but I know that percentage is pretty high. So if they can appear via their iPhone or Android phone, that's definitely a help. If not, there is a call-in number available for all Zoom meetings. It comes with the license. If waiting room is used, the people calling in to the phone are placed on hold, just like the waiting room. As soon as they get admitted in, they do get admitted to the meeting room. So that's another solution. I know that Magistrate Strawbridge had sent caseworkers appearing on a computer and then calling the parent or caregiver and putting them on speakerphone. We're able to hear the caller and the caller can hear us, and it's on the recording without issue. We've also done that with Polycom. Yeah, that works as well. We've been able to do that with our Blue Man. We have a CourtSmart in the courthouse. So if the judge is in the courthouse and they want to go on the record with the recording from the court, if they're on Zoom, they can turn their speakers on and then record through CourtSmart, and that works as well. Judge Bristol also said we also have been able to have parents call their attorneys and appear through the attorney's Zoom link. We've also had parents go to their attorney's office and appear from there. Any additional from either of you on that?
No, I think that, as I said earlier, it's been great to see the frequency in which parents are actually attending hearings now because they don't have those transportation issues.
Yeah, and they're home.
Yeah.
I would second that. We've even had homeless parents from a tent call in to the hearing with their phone because the Wi-Fi was connected to the gas station they were living next to. And they were able to fully participate and give us an appropriate email address to send consent paperwork to.
That's great. Okay, let's move on here. So how is notice given for Zoom hearings? Does it change if it was a pre-COVID notice versus a hearing being set now for the first time? So there's a couple of answers to this. Calendaring apps are definitely the first responder for this. So you can use, we're a Google Gmail environment for the court. So you could definitely use a Google Calendar and create a meeting invitation through Google Calendar, or use Outlook if you're an Outlook environment. Although we primarily don't use the Google Calendar to send this out, we have our court viewer or our scheduling system that we can actively email out to all the parties on a case because of the portal. So our system lets you send an email out to all parties and actively send it to everybody on the actual service list. Now, if somebody's not on the service list, you can add additional emails as well. So that's really a good thing. If your circuit has a viewer that does that, that's a great idea as well. I want to show you also the court directory. So we've also published all the court Zoom IDs on the same court directory where everybody would go to find out what courtroom they're in. So if anybody goes in and looks for Judge Bristol, she's right here, you can go to this Zoom link right here, and that'll let you in, and then it'll be in her waiting room. So she'll be able to filter people in as needed. They've also been creating division procedures as needed and putting that information there. Now, again, if they can't appear by smartphone or their computer, the meeting IDs here and all the phone numbers are published on the website as well. So the website really is a good advantage for that. Go back to here. Divisions are noticing parties if they're scheduling now to make sure they're putting the Zoom information and not just the courthouse location, because we have had some confusion with parties showing up to the court now confused and making sure that they're available for the hearing, but not realizing the court's closed. For hearings that have been scheduled prior to COVID, we've had our case managers and email, call attorneys, parents with the Zoom link and information. I believe this is from Jim Strawbridge. The information is also available on our website. For the hearing that is currently being scheduled, we include the Zoom link on the court order with the caveat that if we are not back in person hearings, they can use the Zoom link. So yeah, so these are all really good options as well.
We've had great success in having our case managers and judicial assistants call attorneys, and for attorneys to reach out to their parents, although our case managers have been reaching out to parents as well to give them the Zoom information for hearings that had been scheduled prior to the COVID quarantine.
That's great. So when proceedings are conducted in the courtroom, the attorney can approach a witness with a document or photograph and ask the witness questions, have the witnesses read it, identify, etc. How is this done differently in a Zoom hearing? So during Zoom proceedings, the judge can enable access to share screen and present evidence from their PC. There definitely needs to be procedure in place that the evidence was already filed, or however the filing proceedings are for this time, and then been reviewed by both parties prior to the hearing. This is something we highlight in our mock jury trial. Both attorneys were able to, when they had their expert witness on the stand, the virtual stand, shared their screen, showed x-rays to the expert witness, and were able to talk back and forth and you know, say, okay, what were your findings based off of this x-ray and so on. So that really helped. We did do that in the mock trial. So that's really something that's doable. Something else we're doing is in our CMS system, our court viewer, when an attorney schedules a hearing, they can submit supporting documents in PDF format. So they can submit those documents when they schedule the hearing or even afterwards. And that could be copies of the evidence, copies of the motion, anything like that. And then the judge can actually, if the judge wants to share her screen, she can share that from there. And then if opposing party wants to submit it, as long as they're a party to the case at the portal, our system also allows them to submit supporting documents. So that's really been easy, a good way for us to do that as well. Judge Bristol, you guys are using that, right?
I haven't used it yet, but there are other judges on the dependency floor that have used that. They've asked for the attorneys to confer with his in-court clerk and then upload the documents to CMS so they can be marked for identification. So if they're going to be used during an evidentiary hearing or a trial, everything's loaded up so all the attorneys would have the ability to be able to go on and look at what's been marked for identification and, if necessary, make any objections to the record.
Perfect. Okay. How do attorneys consult with their clients during Zoom? I think we talked about this a little bit. If they're not co-located, is there leeway for the attorney to consult the client before cross-examining? How is this accomplished? Definitely the waiting room is one way to do this. It's the easiest way. Send them back to the waiting room, have them call each other. They could also FaceTime each other if they both have iPhones. There's different venues they can use, definitely. The breakout room's another way that they can do it. If it's too much of a hassle for the judge to do, you can put a JA or a case manager as a co-host. While I'm there, it's another question that didn't come up, but I know came up a lot in the early stages for us. Do JAs or case managers need an account to be co-host? They don't need one. So for the most part, the judge is the only one that has an account. We do have a couple of senior case managers that have accounts because it just makes it easier for them to run a Zoom meeting and be able to host alongside a judge. But for the most part, it's just the judge's meeting. And then the case manager or the JA can send people to breakout rooms. The good thing about a breakout room, it's completely private. So they can't get out of the breakout room. There's settings that you can keep them in there. They can ask to be removed, and then you can send messages in. And that's how we did it for the jury on our mock trial. We sent everybody to the breakout room. I left them in there for a couple minutes, sent them a message to see if they were ready. They sent me back a message and said, okay, yeah, we have our verdict. And then we brought them back in.
Orlando, I know that folks have asked whether or not the breakout rooms are being recorded. So we want to make sure that attorneys feel okay that they can have a private conversation with their client and not have to worry about other people hearing it or it being recorded. Correct.
So we have the breakout rooms set to off. Nobody is allowed to record outside of the user, the actual court host. So we don't have that available. That doesn't stop them from recording from another device. So always be aware of that. You know, people could have another phone available, record audio, stuff like that. So there are always things we need to think about when it comes to that stuff.
I do see some folks that are posting some questions to chat. We do recognize that those questions are there, and we will get to those questions. We're just going to quickly run through the rest.
We've got a couple more
questions that have been submitted, and then we'll get to the chat questions.
Perfect. We've got a couple more pages of questions, and we'll be right there with the chat. How are exhibits distributed to all parties when people are appearing remotely? So again, we just talked about this through our CMS app. We use the supporting documents. We also have people, so yeah, uploading it through there. Email is another way to do it. So it just depends on the circuit and how they want to do it, how they want to, you know, be able to manage that. So there's different ways to do that. Next question here: how often are stenographers present at Zoom hearings? This is two-part. So for us, court reporting is always present where they're required. When they were required in the court, so they're always invited into any recording meetings. And then even though the meeting is being recorded to Zoom, it'll eventually make it to our court servers and CourtSmart to be put in the transcript. Really, the court reporter is there to make sure the record is clear, asking parties to restate whatever they had said if it's not clear, and to take tag notes so that once it's transcribed, if they want to add any other information. Our hearings, the other part on the stenographer side, if a stenographer's appearing, the parties can invite them just like they bring them to court. The issue, and we've had this in the first week actually with one of our judges, a stenographer was having technical difficulties. At that point, you'd have to decide if you're going to continue or cancel or reset the hearing for the stenographer, or if they decide to continue and the judge isn't currently actively recording, and it's up to the judge and up to the court, they could start the recording and then have a court request for the transcript. Definitely a process that somebody would want to look at. Our hearing's still recorded even in the absence of a stenographer. Again, we're only recording automatically for cases that are required, and then judges are hitting record if needed during the course of a hearing. Okay. Next question here. These are more judge and GM questions, so I'm going to go ahead and read the questions and the answers, and you guys can jump in as needed. Are any consent for failure to appear granted at a Zoom hearing? We've not experienced that. I believe this is Jim Strawbridge. We have not experienced this yet due to our summons not including the Zoom information and or Zoom information having not yet been made available. However, we do anticipate this request being made in the future. Jim Strawbridge, you wanna elaborate on this a little bit, or it's good?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Obviously, we set things out in dependency for publication and things. We didn't have Zoom information for those hearings, and we didn't continue or pass any hearings. So, you know, if someone was able to have notice and then just happened that the caseworker was able to communicate with them, then we continue on and just set a future date. We just give it kind of a past date or another date for an advisory or publication. But we have been in talks within the circuit with the parties about, you know, whether they intend to make those requests, and I think that they will now that they've been adding the Zoom meeting information and ID and rules for the meetings into their summons and other paperwork.
Okay. Judge Bristol stated we have had some consents ordered when a parent has appeared for a hearing by Zoom already and has been personally admonished. We have had parents missing for a while, so their summons have been published, but due to Zoom link not being in the publication, we've reset those hearings and have had the department add the Zoom link into the publication. Anything to add to that, Judge Bristol?
No, I have had parents who've been properly admonished, you know, as in person as you can be on Zoom, on video and audio, and were properly admonished by myself to be present for their advisory and or trial hearing. And they did not appear when we know that they had the capability of doing so. So I have entered consents. I do I do admonish the attorneys that if there was a legitimate basis to vacate that consent, if there was any problem with them getting on Zoom, that I would certainly entertain properly filed motions to vacate that consent. For our parents that have been missing for a while, we just started adding in the Zoom link to the publication, but for ones that we missed adding that in because the hearings occurred before the quarantine, I've just reset those over so that we can include the Zoom link.
Great. The next question we didn't really have an answer to. Are such motions even made? If so, are they ever denied? Are they even being made, or?
No, we haven't seen them.
Okay.
So.
All right, next one here. How does a judge, as trier of fact, determine witness credibility during Zoom hearing as opposed to normally in the court? We do our best to use our common sense. If we're not able to do so, the hearing could be reset. Anything to add to that?
I mean, not really. It's really just your own judgment call. You've seen these families. It's probably a little more difficult if the witness doesn't have video and you're only
Right. I was just going to ask that. What about if they don't have video?
yeah. So it's totally a judgment call that you have to make. If you're not comfortable in doing so, then the best thing to do really is to reset the hearing.
Right. Okay. Is there a leeway for or tennis motions in a Zoom hearing? We do allow this and treat it similar to how we would in a regular in-person hearing. And then I think Bristol said we do as well. Is that enough? Or you guys have any other?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
No.
All right. I think I've got a couple more questions. Does the judge make any specific findings related to the use of Zoom, AV or AOSC 2016, etc.? I've not done so, but would if requested. And both have said they would if requested. Are there additional findings of fact that need to be made both on the record and in the record? I've not found that the need to so far to make any other additional findings, but would consider them if asked. Even with all the AOs that have been entered, are there any findings made under 39.1036? If not, how are continuances being handled? The timeline belongs to the child, so if we need to continue something, we use the shortest duration needed to accomplish the reason for the continuance. If a continuance is requested due to legitimate reasons regarding due process, they should be seriously considered. It would be unfortunate if a ruling was reversed and permanency is extended further for a child. If the matter is continued, the shortest time should be allowed. Anything to add?
No, I think we can, while we have about 15 minutes remaining, that we should get to those chat questions.
Perfect. All right, let's jump over. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to start from the top. So Judge Angelica DZ, in the 11th, we are hearing some of the same concerns. Right now, we are not having trials, so it really hasn't been addressed. Judge Jason Emilios, I denied oral motions for TPR trial continuances without prejudice. I asked that parents' counsel put their argument in writing for careful consideration. I specifically asked for factors that they argue the court will be unable to fairly and adequately address in Zoom trial. I told them I would grant short continuances for them to prepare Zoom, but since there is no indication of how long the social distancing will last, I don't want to simply continue everything indefinitely.
And that's a great way to do it. Certainly oral motions, really should be memorialized in order to set an appropriate record on that. And if there's a way for them to address what their specific issues are, and there's a way for you to address them and for people to come to an agreement on them, the hope would be then for the trial to be able to proceed.
Great. Now, the next question was a game changer for us. Are you suggesting that the court reporter supplements the Zoom recordings? In other words, which is the primary record keeper of Zoom or the official court reporter? So the official record, according to us, is the final transcript. So we're recording the audio from Zoom, and every night we are offloading our audio from our Zoom to our servers and then converting them to our court reporting system, CourtSmart. And then as requested, as normal, the court reporter transcribes it into the transcripts and adds tags as needed. So the official record is the final document.
What's been really great with our system is our court reporters have been logging into our Zoom rooms.
Right.
So if there's a problem with audio or their ability to be able to tag who's speaking, name, the spelling of names and things like that, they're able to come on and ask people to speak more clearly or ask for clarification in name spellings, things like that. So it's been super helpful and useful to have our court reporters log in to each one of our Zoom hearings.
Great. Those are all the chat questions. If anybody has a question, you can definitely raise your hand, chime in. Carrie, do you have any other questions maybe that we didn't cover that maybe you think we should add?
Not that I can think of. Somebody did ask about appearance of children. Has Magistrate Strawbridge or Judge Bristol, have you had children appear by Zoom?
We had, well, I've had kids appear if they're reunified with their parent and the parent is, we're having a status conference. I've actually seen the kids at home with their parents or with their caregivers. I do the therapeutic court, so I'm doing the ECC, so the kids are usually younger than 5, so they think it's kind of funny to see themselves on Zoom. I have because we're unified family here in the 17th, I've had some of the family judges inquiring about in-camera hearings for kids, and they're attempting to do those through breakout rooms.
So I've had 2 teenagers appear, and I handle our extended foster care. We have a docket for that, and those kids are just calling in, which is funny because many of them are in work or trying to do virtual school, and they act very annoyed by having to call in for court. But I'm glad to see that they're all doing well. And then we had a teenager appear and wanted to speak with me without counsel, without the parents present, so we ended up doing just a separate meeting time to speak with her, and that everyone agreed to, and we recorded it. But she was older, so she's able to, use her phone, and that worked better. We do have a pending contested motion where a child wishes to testify about why she doesn't want to go home. And we had a pretrial conference about what parameters we want to have everyone agree to and put in place so that if she's testifying, if something happens and she becomes upset, we have steps and things in place. And I think that's the most important thing to think about with Zoom, is that everyone's communicating, that everyone's being very patient with each other because these things do take longer, and kind of agreeing on some rules before you start a hearing like that.
As some of you may have heard, the Supreme Court put together a task force that's going to evaluate how we're going to be reopening the courts in 4 different stages. I really encourage any or all of you, if you've noticed any pitfalls, have any concerns, to please email me. We're a large state, and the South is very different than the North, than the East, than the West. So I really want to make sure that folks throughout the whole state, that there's going to be some consistency whenever possible in how we're going to be handling these hearings and the reopening of these divisions. So please feel free to email me any questions or concerns or things that you feel need to be considered in your local area for the task force to consider and work on.
And also just a comment that, the circuits may have different policies on recording and streaming the proceedings. So just recognizing that this is sharing the 17th Judicial Circuit and the 4th Judicial Circuit experiences. So thank you, Gay, for mentioning that.
Are there any other questions that Magistrate Strawbridge or myself or Orlando can help you all with? Well, I want to thank Asuka again for putting this together. Thank you, Carrie. And thank you, Magistrate Strawbridge, for your knowledge and tips and everything. And huge kudos and spirit fingers to Orlando for putting it together for us.
This was great. I'm glad we were able to take care of this for you guys. It's awesome.
Our go-to guy and on my speed dial.
We definitely will be. We recorded this, so we will be publishing it and sending it over to Carrie so we can distribute it after that.
May I interrupt with a quick question?
Yeah.
Sure, Judge.
Does anyone have a method of swearing somebody in formally if you do not see their face on a video and you don't have a notary? Let's say a parent calls in. Do we have any ability to take an oath?
Well, the Supreme Court has that in their AO with regards to electronic or not having a notary present and doing it over audio. I'll usually have somebody attest to the person's voice.
I think if I read it correctly, and maybe I didn't, it's still only allowed for video. It did not allow for audio only. And I've used that technique too to ask somebody else under oath if they recognize the voice. And I've even stated on the record, I recognize the voice and seen the person before in person and authenticated the number, etc. But
Right.
I still don't think there's any formal legal ability for us to swear in someone unless they have a notary or unless they have a video presence.
And that's what the AO says.
I think that's a real hindrance to what we do.
Yeah.
But I think we're stuck with it unless anyone has an idea.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's certainly something that I can bring to the task force for consideration.
Okay.
Matt, this is Judge Zayas from the 11th.
Yes.
I'll say this, when I recognize the voice or the parties are willing, the parties recognize the voice, because we have some repeat people who come in, certain attorneys or whatever. I'll ask, I recognize that we have to, according to the AO, we have to have them on video. But if we don't see them and I recognize the voice or somebody else in the conference recognizes the voice, I'll ask point blank. I'll say, listen, there is an AO that requires visual contact with this person, but does anybody have any objection to me taking the oath over the phone? And if the parties agree to it, I think that's your way around it. I think that
Right. And waive any objections, but that has to be really made clear on the record.
Correct. Darn those appellate attorneys. I mean, I was an appellate attorney for many, many, many years. So it's, in my opinion, there are some things that are patently illegal, cannot do under any circumstances. But there are a lot of things that you can do if the parties agree to it. And I believe that this situation is something that you can get around if everybody attests, yes, I know who that is. Because we're in the middle of a crisis situation.
Right.
And for that reason, if everybody agrees, I think that you're going to be good and you're not going to be reversed and there's not going to be a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, if you guys think of any follow-up questions, you can forward them to Carrie. And, we'll hopefully get some answers for you.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you, everyone. I just put my email in the chat, but I'm sure you received plenty of emails from me leading up to this.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great day.
Thank you,
Stay-
everybody.
stay
Stay
safe.
safe.
Thank you all. Thank you,
very
Orlando.
much.